Jim Harbaugh has been winning in the NFL for a very long time. In his first 3 years as the head coach of the 49ers, he took them to three straight NFC championship games and the Super Bowl appearance included during that span. Then he went back to college, delivered a national championship to his alma mater, and he came back last year. In his first season back in the National Football League, he overachieved, leading the Chargers to the postseason, where on paper, going into last season, they didn't look like a playoff team, but you gave them the benefit of a doubt due to Jim Harbaugh's resume and track record of being able to win everywhere he goes. And with what the Chargers did last year and what they've done in free agency so far, investing into improving the offensive line, bringing in Najee Harris at running back, who should be really good behind that offensive line. You bring in a few key pieces on defense as well. Not a lot of big name guys, but guys who could be good rotational pieces. But yet, NFL fans and Chargers fans included are still not happy with the current state of the team. They still refuse to accept how Jim Harbaugh wins. They keep pushing the issue that the Chargers have to draft a wide receiver in the first round of this year's draft when Jim Harbaugh has won with guys like Vernon Davis and Michael Crabtree being his top weapons in the passing game. Last year, Ladd McConkey was a second-round pick and was the Chargers' best wideout. Jim Harbaugh has shown time after time, even when he was coaching college ball at Michigan, that he doesn't need elite wide receiver play to win the championship. So why is it that guys in the NFL media and Chargers fans keep worrying about the Chargers passing on a wide receiver in the first round of this year's draft? They will be perfectly okay if they take another offensive lineman or trade up for a defensive lineman or a guy like Will Johnson in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft. Not getting an elite wide receiver this offseason will not hurt the Los Angeles Chargers. There were people who were disappointed because they didn't go after DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is not worth the hefty contract that the Steelers just gave him. There's no sense in trading for a guy like Tyreek Hill, who's a locker room cancer and is just an awful human being off the field. All the Chargers need is to continue to cement themselves on the line of scrimmage. Jim Harbaugh's philosophy works. It's worked in San Francisco. It worked last year. You know the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Chargers fans need to stop stressing over this team possibly passing on a wide receiver in the first round. They will be perfectly okay. Why? Because that's not the way Jim Harbaugh wins football games. It's crazy to think that there's more than one way to win a Super Bowl. The Ravens have won the Super Bowl despite not having a stacked team of wide receivers. They won the Super Bowl against Jim Harbaugh with Anquan Bolden, who was up there in age, Torrey Smith, and Dennis Pitta. There's been plenty of teams that have won Super Bowls despite not having elite perimeter play. Hell, the Eagles dominated the Chiefs in this past year's Super Bowl. Why? Not because they had A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but because they outright dominated the Chiefs on the line of scrimmage. Games are won and lost based off what you do in the trenches. The Cincinnati Bengals have 40 to almost 50% of their salary cap invested in 3 players, which is going to hinder them from ever making it back to another Super Bowl again, at least for the foreseeable future. Because now, with you paying Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase so much money, you're not going to have enough to spread around to make sure that you have a completely balanced football team. You're going to be lacking the talent needed on the offensive line, and you're not going to have a lot of great pieces on defense, which is going to put even more pressure on you to nail the draft, something that the Cincinnati Bengals have been pretty hit or miss at doing. You don't want to overinvest at wide receiver, where it's a position that is more flash than it is necessity. The idea of having an elite wide receiver looks good aesthetically, but it is not something that is a must-have if you want to compete for a Super Bowl. Something that you gotta have if you want to compete for a Super Bowl is good defensive line play. Because how else are you going to be able to get a guy like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson off the field when it matters the most late in the fourth quarter in a playoff game? How are you going to be able to keep your star quarterback Justin Herbert upright, who is probably the toughest quarterback in the league with all of the injuries that he was playing through last year? A huge reason why the Chargers lost that playoff game to the Texans in the wild card round wasn't all because they had bad receiver play, but Justin Herbert just had an off game. Yeah, there were a good amount of drops in that game, but that still doesn't mean Jim Harbaugh needs to pivot away from what has worked all throughout his coaching career. If you have been able to make it to the playoffs like what you did last year without having elite receiver play, you can do the same thing again. Your offensive coordinator is Greg Roman. The guy treats 3 tight end sets like they're 4 wide receiver sets. Greg Roman's offenses have been good enough to win championships. They tried to scapegoat him in Baltimore, say he was holding back Lamar Jackson. And yet the Ravens still have been unable to get over the hump despite having a new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, who's done a very good job. He's elevated that offense to a different level that they weren't able to reach under Greg Roman, yet they continue to still get the same results. Jim Harbaugh understands what it takes to win in the NFL, and it doesn't include having an elite wide receiver. You don't need to have top wide receiver play to win in today's NFL. There are other ways to win other than being built like the Philadelphia Eagles. You still got to have identity. And the identity of Jim Harbaugh is being able to push you around, want to win the time of possession battle, emphasizing ball security, and relying on having a great defense. He doesn't need to invest high draft picks into receiver. This isn't even a great wide receiving class. It's a solid wide receiver class, but not as good as what we've seen like last year when you had guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. This is a draft class that has a good amount of wide receiver 2s, a lot of maybe low-end wide receiver 1s that you can get in the middle portions of this year's draft. The Chargers could walk away with a guy like Torrey Horton. If you don't know who he is, he's a really good wide receiver from Colorado State. I call him the Colorado Killer because I found out about him a few years ago when Deion was in his first year at Colorado, and he was torching that Colorado Buffs defense. If you get a guy like a Torrey Horton in the mid-rounds, or if you walk away with a Tyler Warren or Colton Loveland in the first round, that'll be another weapon for Justin Herbert to throw the football to. But if you go offensive lineman, defensive line in the first round, there's nothing wrong with that because that is the identity that Jim Harbaugh has been comfortable with being able to have success with. And if it isn't broke, there's no reason to derive away from that.